And good afternoon. Welcome to our Facebook Live edition of Ask a Lawyer. I'm attorney Michael Bender.
And I'm attorney Allison Tilton, and we are the Gray Legal Group.
And of course, with all good lawyer videos, we do need to start with the information in this video is for general information purposes only. Nothing should be taken as legal advice for any individual case or situation. This information does not intend to create, and receipt or viewing does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. All right, legalese done. We're excited. My favorite topic today. We've got some questions lined up about custody and visitation, something we see quite frequently up in court. So, should I go with the first question here?
Absolutely.
All right.
Let's start it out.
If I told the other parent that I would be back and the child, I would bring back the child on a certain date after school break, and I didn't make it on time because of the other parent's failure on the agreements for travel expenses, can he call the cops on me? So, Allison, you want to start off with that one?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. The issue in this case, the issue in this question, let's say, is that the question actually does not provide enough information. So we're going to make a couple assumptions in answering this question. One, we are going to assume that there are court orders that relate to custody visitation and when the child needs to be returned to the other parent. We're also assuming that the court has made orders on who's responsible for the payment of travel expenses. So to tackle the first part of the question, with regards to if the child has to be back on a certain date, if the order says that the child has to be back on a certain date, you need to be making all reasonable efforts to get that child back on time. Essentially, you want to be perceived as the parent who's following the custody order as best as possible, and make every effort to follow through and return the child when the court order says that the child has to be back. Michael, do you want to address the travel expenses?
With regards to travel expenses, this is kind of a what do the court orders say? If you've got court orders that one parent is responsible, say the receiving parent will take this situation here that the child's going to go back to dad. Dad's responsible for the making the travel arrangements, making the payments. If he doesn't do that, I think that mom needs to make every attempt to get the child back to dad on that certain date, front the money for that. And then, because there's an order that says dad bears the expenses, mom can then go back to court and seek a reimbursement from dad for those. Now I want to twist this just a little bit here. Mm-hmm. We're assuming in this also that in this scenario, dad, when we have bring back the child, dad has primary custody. So we're starting school. It's very important that the child gets back by a certain time. If this was a visitation scenario where dad was just going to be exercising a week or so of visitation and he was responsible for it, but he didn't make any efforts to go ahead and arrange the visitation, arrange the travel, I don't think there would be a necessity for mom to front the cost, expend the money to make sure dad exercises his visitation time.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Did we address this part of the question?
Anybody, can he call the cops on me? Anybody can call the cops at any point in time. In fact, we'll be addressing more of that down the road. But there's not much that, given that the child's we're assuming the child's out of state, not much that they would do. It would have to be a court filing, I think, to get any law enforcement involved.
I agree. So the second question that was posed to us, it's also a pretty general question. It just says that we have a hearing on custody visitation, and I want my child to talk to the judge. How old does my child have to be to talk to the judge? This again, we've got a lot of straight from the code responses, but they're never clear answers. So the Family Law Code tells us very clearly that if a child is 14, the court must consider the child's wishes in determining custody visitation, unless the judge feels as though it's not in the child's best interest to basically be part of the case. So again, the code says 14, but then the judge has the discretion to decide whether or not it should be 14. The judge can also have a child that's under the age of 14 give an appearance or give testimony regarding custody visitation desires. However, it's important to remember that the courts do not want to involve any children in custody matters, and typically the judge, let's say, is not the one that talks to the children at all. Typically, it is the mediator through the child custody recommending counseling that makes the determination on whether or not that child needs to be interviewed in determining the custody agreement. And if the mediator determines that the child needs to be interviewed, they have the child come back, and that child's interviewed without mom or dad being present. Anything to add?
Yeah, one thing to take a step forward, I think it's very important that it's extremely rare to have children speak directly with the judge. If they do so, it's actually done in the judge's chambers. It's not an open court. They're not put on the stand. The court reporter goes back there with just the judge, and the judge will speak with them directly. But one thing that this doesn't necessarily address, and you kind of taking one step further, is when we look at custody evaluations, Family Code Section 3111 or Evidence Code 730, when you have an expert coming in and taking a look at the custody matter, those investigators will speak with the children. It's outside the court setting. It's typically at the psychologist's office, the ones that are doing the investigation, but that's when they'll get a lot of information, even more than what you'll get through it's called mediation in some counties, child custody recommending counseling here in Riverside County. San Diego County is Family Court Services. They'll get a lot more information than those mediators do.
And those custody evaluators are going to talk to the child or the children regardless of what age those kids are. So you could have a child as young as 2, and although they can't really verbalize much of their skills or much of their concerns, the custody evaluator is still going to take a look at that child and see how that child's interacting with the parents.
Okay, we'll go our final question here with regards to custody and visitation. We have orders in place. On Dad's weekends, my 15-year-old doesn't want to go. Must I force him to go?
Always leaving the answers today. So, you have a 15-year-old, you need to be making all reasonable efforts, and I'll say 15, 16, 17-year-olds, even some 14-year-olds, you need to be making all reasonable efforts to encourage your child to go to see dad, go to see the other parent, so that the other parent has the ability to have visitation with the child. Of course, there is no way that you're going to force a teenager to get in a car. You're not going to force a teenager to go on the visitation, but you need to be making efforts to get them to go.
One thing I'd like to add here, a lot of times people think, oh, well, if you don't have our son come with me for visitation, I'm going to call the cops. Certain times, calling law enforcement is advisable and is warranted, particularly when they're younger, if somebody doesn't show up for the visitation. But to force a teenager to get from one car to the other, odds are law enforcement's probably not going to do much, and it's only going to add attention and add to that negative feelings that the child has for the other parent. If a child doesn't want to go to visitation, there may be some underlying issues that they need to address, and a custody order or a visitation modification may be warranted. You might want to file something with the court, request that the child be enrolled in therapy. If there's a long history of this, there may be reunification therapy that might lend to heal that bond between father and child, or parent and child.
And just lastly, if there is a request for order filed regarding the parent's inability to have visitation with the child, at that point the court, maybe your orders are really old, maybe these orders were entered into when the child was a lot younger, and at that point the court is probably more likely to enter an order that provides for discretionary visitation and that discretionary visitation would at that point be at the child's discretion as to whether or not he or she wanted to go with the other parent.
All right, well, that wraps it up for today on custody visitation. Next week, we actually have a special Ask a Lawyer. We're going to be on location just outside the Hemet Courthouse. Got a trial starting at 1:30, so we can't actually be live at 1:30. So we'll be 1 o'clock next Tuesday. Join us then, and then every Tuesday after that, 1:30, as we tackle the family law issues important to our community. If you have a legal question or topic you want us to address, go to thegreatlegalgroup.com and click on Ask a Lawyer.